It's the Range Ronin, and I can truthfully tell you that deciding to set up a pistol specifically for home defense use was a mind-twisting ordeal. I have quite a few pistols that can fill that role, with my Rock Island Armory 1911 FS Tactical playing the lead role, a transition from a carry piece to a home defense pistol. The pistol is in 45 ACP chambering that, even with being influenced by the 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge, and with several pistols from which I can launch that 10mm sized bullet from, still resides as my favorite cartridge. The pistol, but not the cartridge, told me that it needed to be retired from active duty. I listened and decided to replace its faithful companion with something, well, more modern. In addition, I was duly impressed with the Holosun HE507C when I reviewed my son-in-law's Walther PDP, so much that I knew that a Holosun HE507C-GR X2 was going to be part of the package. So, my friends, stick with me if you want to view information about what I consider a near-perfect home defense package for my needs. There are many features to cover for both the G41 MOS and the Holosun HE507C-GR X2, so let me dive in with both feet. The G41 MOS, according to Glock, is a competition pistol with a basic magazine capacity of 13 rounds of 45 ACP ammunition. This G41 MOS was found used, but in excellent condition. Hilltop Pawn in Snellville, Georgia, a prime provider for my bad habit of purchasing firearms when I don't need to, fully checked the G41 MOS out and was instrumental in installing both the Optic and the desired grip adapter before I headed out the door. All that was needed for me, after the point of purchase, was to do my thing, produce a review, and pass on to you what this package is all about. So, let's take a journey with the G41 MOS first, and then get into the chosen optic, maintenance of both, range time, carry and concealment, and my final thoughts. The G41 MOS is Generation 4. First of all, that means that while there are improvements over the Gen 3 version, some things remain, while Gen 5 versions takes things a step further. The Gen 4, when compared to the Gen 3, brought more ambidextrous parts, some things lefties can enjoy. The Gen 4 was upgraded to a larger magazine release button. This was a major improvement in my mind, and my thumb appreciates it. The magazine release button can be installed on the right side for left-hand shooters. Gen 4s featured a new grid-like grip that improved the shooter's grip on the gun. I definitely favor the Gen 4 grip over the Gen 3. Gen 4s introduced a modular backstrap system to help accommodate different-sized hands. For me, the thickness of backstrap goes on all of my Glocks that has this capability. Gen 4s also switched to a double recoil spring to mitigate recoil. Anything in reduction of recoil is fine with me. Finger grooves for the grip still remain on the Gen 4, but as I have mentioned before, I can live with them or without them. I have worked with both. There is a G41 non-MOS version. In fact, I believe that the G41 was the first long slide of the 45 ACP family, and is originally a Gen 4 product. Will it go into a Gen 5? I can't really answer that. The G41 MOS is essentially a G41 slide on a G21 frame. The total slide length is 8.31 inches versus the G21's 7.60 inches, plus the slide width is 1.0 inch as compared to the 1.12 inch slide width of the G21. The muzzle end of the G41 slide is nicely beveled, which aids in holstering, but not much else. It can obviously be seen that the slide of the G41 extends well beyond the frame. Some folks have asked, why the hole in the bottom of the dust cover? Well, that hole, when the pistol is disassembled, allows removal of the front sight that is held into place with a single screw. Without that hole, it would be nearly impossible to remove the front sight. Unlike the G17L, the long slide competition version of the G17, the G41 MOS does not have a top slide cut, although the G41 MOS is a competition pistol. The front and rear sights on this particular piece are stock Glock sights, with the front sight being a fixed standard height single dot, while the rear sight is a standard height fully adjustable for windage and elevation unit. I'll talk a bit more about those sights when I get to the Optic segment. There are no front serrations to assist in racking or releasing the slide. The ejection port is typical Glock and sufficiently allows spent cartridge cases to be expelled far away from the pistol. The external extractor, which also serves as a chamber-loaded indicator, pulls spent cases from the chamber very efficiently. The G41 MOS comes with adapter plates for mounting various optics. As I mentioned, optic mounting was performed at the point of purchase. With that said, if you intend on mounting an optic yourself to any MOS version Glock, I advise you to download the MOS instructions at the Glock Downloadable Materials website to help you in your endeavor. A slide lock is a standard Glock left side only unit. I started getting spoiled with the Gen 5 ambidextrous slide lock and would like one on this one. But it is what it is, and I have lived long enough with left side only slide locks not to concern myself with ambidextrous units. The slide release utilizes that flat spring rather than the new coil spring. The frame, you will notice, incorporates the locking block pin, which makes the G41 MOS a 3-pin unit. The magazine release button is large. That was a welcomed improvement of the Gen 4 versions. Of my desires for this pistol, along with an ambidextrous slide lock lever, I would not mind an ambidextrous magazine release button that can work from either side of the pistol. I sometimes use my forefinger to activate the slide lock on pistols that have them, and using my index finger to push a magazine release button would not bother me. If nothing else, that would provide options that could be used when needed. The thumb ledge on the grip remains, and the grip is not flared at the bottom, as with Gen 5 versions. The grip pattern I welcome, as I found the Gen 3 grips slick in my hands, and the more coarser grip texture my hand likes. As also mentioned, the finger groove grip is still present, and I really don't mind them, as they are spaced adequately for my fingers. The G41 MOS comes with 4 grip adapters, 2 of the beaver tail type and 2 non-beaver tail types. For my hand, the thickest of the beaver tail grip adapters was installed. With this adapter, my trigger finger rests on the face of the trigger at the first joint, right where I like it to rest. Some folks just like the tip of the trigger finger to rest on the trigger, and that is fine if it works for you. Select a suitable adapter, or not, to give you what you want. The grip length is what I really like on full-size Glock pistols. It has taken me a while to come with terms with the grip angle, but the grip contour feels good in my hand, with the highest curve of the grip gently massaging the palmar, hypothenar, thenar, and median palmar region of my hand, while filling the first interdigital space. The G41 MOS, as with all Glock pistols, incorporates the Glock Safe Action Trigger System, which begins with the trigger safety that prevents the trigger from moving into the frame if not pressed fully. The trigger press is typical Gen 4, meaning that there is slight free play before the trigger meets resistance, as it begins staging the striker. A very spongy portion of the pull is felt as the trigger is pulled to the rear until the striker releases. Trigger pull weight on this G41 MOS measured out at 2 pounds 9.7 ounces with a 5-pull average. It is not the best trigger pull that I have felt from Glock pistols, but more than adequate for my use, which is not competition. The trigger guard is the usual Glock squared-off and serrated type with an opening that will accommodate a gloved hand and a slight undercut at the rear to accommodate getting as high of a grip on the handle as possible. The G41 MOS came with 2 Glock stock 13-round magazines. Having that initial capacity of 13 plus 1, 45 ACP rounds in the gun gives me warm fuzzies. 3 additional magazines provide warmer fuzzies. Now, let me get to that chosen optic. The chosen optic for the G41 MOS is the Holosun HE507C-GR X2, an open reflex optical sight with features like lock mode that, when activated, locks the buttons, preventing inadvertent setting changes. The biggest thing that I like about this optic is the viewing area. The window size is 0.63 by 0.91 inch, which means that I don't have to fight as much as with smaller window sizes to get that reticle into my view. The second biggest like about this optic is the reticle, a 2 MOA green dot surrounded by a 32 MOA circle. I prefer green to red. With astigmatism in my left eye, my dominant eye, dots are not dots. The 32 MOA circle reduces the effect of astigmatism, as does keeping the glow intensity as low as possible to prevent the reticle from flaring. The level of brightness can be adjusted manually, or when the optic is in auto mode, adjust automatically to changing light conditions. The optic has 3 reticle modes: the dot surrounded by the circle only, or the dot only. These modes can be changed easily. I found that I preferred just the 32 MOA circle to be displayed. If I can place my shots within that 32 MOA circle, that makes me a happy camper. We'll see how well using only the 32 MOA circle works out at the range. Additional features include Holosun's Green Super LED with up to 50,000 hour battery life, solar failsafe, and shake awake. The durable housing is made from 7075 aluminum, uses an industry standard footprint, and houses the 1632 battery in a side-mounted tray for easy replacement when needed. I did ponder until I was weak and weary about adding an electronic sight in the first place. The G41 MOS is not intended as a carry piece, although it could be under certain circumstances. The G41 MOS is intended as a home protection piece, where it would primarily be used within the domicile. I don't have that much confidence in anything, especially something that could fail when I need it most, and having an optic mounted on a fast-moving slide says that I am setting it up for failure. Does not make sense to me. However, I was impressed with the Holosun HE507C-GR X2 mounted on my son-in-law's Walther PDP when I reviewed it, to give high consideration to having one of my own, and I considered the G41 an excellent platform with which to have it mounted on. Glock provided the mount, and Hilltop Bond provided the labor to mount it. My job is simply to adjust the reticle where I need it for my eyes. Now, I'm going to sidetrack for just a short bit. Recently, Ken Hackathorn, a renowned trainer and co-founder of the International Defense Pistol Association, submitted a YouTube video regarding red dot sights and their pros and cons. One of his statements was to the effect of that red dot sights were useless within 10 yards during an encounter of the worst kind. In a sense, I do agree with him, but not completely. In close encounters of the worst kind, and I do mean close, there may not be time to get a perfect sight picture. In fact, there may be no time to line up a 3-point sighting system or electronic sight. It will be an instinctive point-and-shoot operation. As a former LEO and armed security officer, I had the occasion to draw my firearm twice, once during a traffic stop and once during a house clearing. I can tell you honestly that my focus was not on the sights of the gun I was carrying. My focus was on the individual who was going for a weapon in the glove box and the area that I was clearing. In the first instance, we are talking a matter of feet from myself to the subject. In the second instance, the distance was much greater, but still, I was concentrated on what I was clearing and not my sights. Looking and listening were my priorities. Do I need to know how to use my sights? Yes, absolutely. But they are only useful when I have time to use them. At the range, when I am shooting for myself or shooting a firearm under review, I can take whatever time I need to try and use the sighting system. In competition, I may have less time to use the sighting system. In a close encounter of the worst kind, I may have no time to use the sighting system, whether that system be manual or electronic. The last thing to mention regarding the Optic is the shake awake and sleep mode. The Optic will automatically enter into sleep mode after 10 minutes of no movement. The Optic will instantaneously wake up and turn on with any motion detected to the last saved setting. The default sleep timer setting is 10 minutes, but there are 4 settings to select from: 10 minutes, 1 hour, 12 hours, or the sleep mode disabled. Now, back to the stock Glock sights for a minute. The stock Glock sights will not go witness. They are too short for that. However, if I bury that front sight just below the top of the rear sight, the POI is close enough for close quarters work. With that said, I will test this theory during the range session. With that in mind, my decision to add an Optic to the G41 MOS was to simply add an option that I could exercise, or not, depending on the situation. Would I add that option on a firearm that is intended for EDC? Absolutely not. Let's get back to the task at hand, the review of the G41 MOS. With that, I'm going to head into the maintenance segment of this review, since I think that I have covered everything that needs to be covered in the features segment. There is no need to go into a full maintenance montage, as disassembly of a Glock is well documented and for the most part well known. If you own a Glock, refer to the manual for general and specific maintenance operations. If you don't own a Glock, but are curious, I invite you to go to the Glock downloadable materials site, where you can view and download a plethora of publications. Next, let me roll into maintaining the Optic. With regard to the maintenance of the Holosun HE507C-GR X2, I am also going to steer you in the direction of the user's manual that is available as a download from the Holosun website, and which contains all of the information that you need to know about maintenance, among other useful information. Now, let's talk about what really matters: shooting the darn thing. You will notice that I am wearing a wrist brace during the range session. The wrist brace performs three vital functions. It provides protective support for the wrist. It supports the wrist to aid in treatment of CTS, carpal tunnel syndrome, and it supports the wrist to aid in treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. While I do not have rheumatoid arthritis, I do suffer at times with CTS. Two things that I don't want. The first is for my CTS to interfere with my shooting, and the second is that I don't want my shooting to aggravate my CTS. Wearing the wrist brace keeps my wrist locked into place while shooting, while adding a little padding to my palmar area. The grip of the G41 and some other pistols are fairly wide. The wrist brace does not add an appreciable amount of padding, and gripping the G41 is no problem. In fact, I seem to get a better and more proper inline grip with the handle. The wrist brace has adjustable straps and slips on and off easily. It does not interfere with any digit movement and is flexible in places other than the wrist. After shooting, the wrist brace is removed. The wrist brace is made by Mueller Sports Medicine, and I have placed a link to it in the description section if you are interested. Prior to filming this range session, I dialed in the HE507C-GR X2 unit while bench resting the G41 MOS. Prior to the range session, and while using the owner's manual, established the settings that I wanted. In other words, I left it in auto mode. The one thing that I do like about the Holosun HE507C Optic is the field of view. The field of view is large as compared to some other optics where I find them too small and too difficult to find the reticle. The fit to the G41 MOS is close enough to the slide's width not to warrant discussion. I did not want an optic to overshadow the pistol, and while it could be perceived as doing such, it is within my acceptable limits. The optic has a shake-awake feature, where it turns on with movement. If there is no movement for 10 minutes, it goes to sleep, just like me. But unlike me, it will instantaneously wake up and turn on, with any motion detected to the last saved setting. The sight has been factory adjusted to an approximate 25-yard zero, and I was checking zero at that distance. Adjusting windage and elevation is simple, and a tool is provided for doing such. Just because the optic is factory adjusted for zero at 25 yards does not mean that it is zeroed for this pistol and the ammunition that I am using. This is a 45 ACP caliber of pistol, and 230 grain fodder is my ammunition of choice. The optic was bore-sighted at the point of purchase. However, it is still up to me to ensure that everything is properly zeroed. The 45 ACP round is essentially a 50-yard cartridge. If I believe what I researched, a 230 grain 45 ACP bullet with a muzzle velocity of 850 feet per second will strike 2.6 inches high at 25 yards, 2.6 inches high at 50 yards, and negative 6.9 inches at 100 yards. The MPBR, or maximum point-blank range, is 88 yards. This will vary subject to a number of factors. MPBR, if you're not familiar with the term, is the farthest distance you are able to shoot a firearm without holding over. Using a MPBR calculator for a 230 grain bullet traveling at 850 feet per second shows a different set of figures, as shown in the image. A close zero of 6 yards puts it almost right at combat distance of the standard 7 yards, whereas the far zero would be at 85 yards, with an MPBR of 110 yards. What all this means is that you take whatever you read with a grain of salt. What truly matters is what your chosen firearm and ammunition will do in your hands. For me and this firearm, I want POI at POA at 7 yards. If I can get within 4 inches of POA at 25 yards, this is just icing on the cake. Now, I'll get back to the matter at hand. The elevation adjustment is located on top of the tail section of the housing, and the windage adjustment is located on the right side of the housing. Windage and elevation adjustments are approximately 1 MOA per click, which means that at 100 yards, each click has a value of 1 MOA, or 1 inch. At 25 yards, each click is worth 1/4 of an inch. The maximum adjustment range is plus or minus 50 MOA from center. So, let me get out of all this technical stuff and get down to business. Well, it has been an interesting range session with the G41 MOS and Holosun HE507C-GR X2 unit. I learned quite a bit from it, and I hope that you did as well. The G41 MOS proved, once again, as most Glock pistols do, that they are more accurate than I could make them, at least for the first sitting with them at the range. Reliability, as usual, is excellent. The Holosun HE507C-GR X2 made for pleasurable viewing, and trying to superimpose that reticle over what I wanted to hit does take some brain retraining to substitute one sight picture over another. Like transitioning from a pistol to a revolver, or vice versa, the reactionary brain cells need to immediately and automatically adjust to what is being handled and how it needs to be handled. If you have ever transitioned from a single-action pistol to one like the Beretta 92 M9 or Sig Sauer, you will get my drift. While some would say that I don't really need to do this, I'm going to do it anyway. Talk briefly about carrying the G41 MOS with Optic. While many would ask, who the heck would carry this thing? I would say some would, depending on the environment. The G41 alone is a hand-filling firearm. Throw in an Optic, and the G41's footprint is humongous. With that in mind, I will only say that locating a suitable holster for the G41 MOS with an Optic is not easy. I did find two holsters from Felco Holsters that I would consider for use with the rotor holster shoulder system, as if I did need something to house this monster, prefer shoulder carry, and the D131 rotor shoulder holster for the gun with lighter laser, or the D901 hybrid rotor shoulder holster with double mag pouch would be my choice, with the latter being preferred. Now I did find other holsters, but they were tactical in nature, and I did not delve into further researching holsters for a fully equipped G41 MOS. Your search may differ, and you may come up with other results. This G41 is destined to be in a lockbox and only brought out for range practice or for serious duty use. Now, let me head you into my final thoughts of the G41 MOS and my current setup for it. With all this rabble and babble over about the G41 MOS, I will say that I have several pistols that could fill the role of a home defender. So why the G41 MOS? Well, it was a question of caliber. 45 ACP has been a mainstay cartridge since I was indoctrinated into the 1911 family. 45 ACP is a battle-tested and proven cartridge, more so than hollow point varieties. Being of the old school persuasion, the 1911 has also been a mainstay of mine. What I desired in a home defense pistol was a pistol that I am familiar with, and the Glock is one that is familiar to me. It had to fire a cartridge that I would not concern myself with over-penetration, and the firearm had to house enough of them should they be needed. The pistol had to be as reasonable in cost as possible, which ruled out some pistols in the marketplace. The G41 MOS, found used, fit that schema. The question of mounting an Optic, or not, was a question that needed an answer. The stock lock sights are adequate for most situations, but for a pistol that may be called upon in a low-light situation, having visible sights better than stock lock sights could be useful. The question of optics had been on my mind. Since I reviewed the Walther PDP with the same HE507C-GR X2 unit mounted on it, I could easily recognize the value of having an optic such as this. With a full understanding of the pros and cons of such devices, aside from Ken Hackathorn's musings, I decided to set up a house gun for myself that would incorporate that optic as just another option to have, should I need it. In all reality, it is highly unlikely that I will need it, but I have a fire extinguisher in my vehicle and several in the house. What's the old saying? I would rather have it and not need it rather than need it and not have it. The G41 MOS has everything I want, uses an effective and proven caliber, is reliable, and is accurate, and Optic is just frosting on the cake. With that, I am going to slice my cake, eat it with a hot cup of chocolate with Irish cream, and close this chapter. I hope to see you again. Until now and then, be vigilant, be armed, and be safe out there.